They're managers and supervisors. That's their title. They're not leaders. They're not trained to be leaders. They usually get their job by virtue of nepotism. And because of nepotism, and they knew somebody, now they have experience, at least on paper. It's not very good experience, but it's experience nonetheless. They aren't trained. They didn't go to any formal course to learn how to become a leader. And they just have that experience of being in the manager and supervisor position. All right. So why are they toxic leaders? Well, they don't really know how to do it the right way. They don't know how to lead people the right way. So they, by default, try to instill fear into their subordinates or their employees. And so that's what works. That's what works for them. That's what they know that works. And that's all they know. They don't know the right way. So how do they stay in their position? Why don't they get fired? Why don't they get called out? Well, they do get recognized by their employees. What happens to those employees often is they get fired, or they find some way of pushing that individual out of the job because they know their deal. They are aware of who they are really, and that they are subpar in their position. They don't know what to do. They don't know how to do it right. It's much more complicated to really lead out of giving purpose, direction, and motivation in the right manner. They don't know how to properly do paperwork on someone, to wake them up and say, hey, look, you need to do your job right, but you need to do it in an effective way where you can get, the proper amount of participation out of their employee, and that's usually done by effective counseling of their employee, and having parameters set in order to meet certain guidelines and goals. And that's very difficult to do, and it takes work, and it takes one to be aware of what their employee is doing. But they don't want to do that. Many people don't want to do that, and unfortunately they end up pulling the company that they're working for down quite a bit. It takes a specific period of time, all in accordance with who the company is, what the industry is, and it takes a person to recognize over a period of time to where it's happened a lot, where they have a revolving door. So somebody higher above that manager and supervisor says, wait a minute here, there's got to be a common factor. There has to be a root cause to this that we're not seeing. What are we not seeing? Let's do an investigation. And so oftentimes what happens is they identify the problem being that supervisor or manager, and then they deal with that supervisor or manager, usually pushing them out the door, firing them. And a lot of people think, well, they'll see the error of their ways, they'll call me back and say, well, we apologize, we fired that manager. So they'll recognize and they'll admit to you that they were wrong, that company. No, they're not going to do that because they don't want to risk any kind of legalities. If there's some legal parameter that they're missing, and perhaps if they were to call you back and say, can you come back in, we would like to hire you again, and we were wrong, and we're sorry about that manager or supervisor that was so unfair to you, and now we realize that, and we would like to have you back. And that does happen sometimes, but that usually happens when the company is a small company and it's run by the person that owns the company. You'll see that happening. But if it's a big mid-sized to large corporation, That's not going to really happen. I haven't seen it happen. And I think it's because it might open up a Pandora's box of legal issues if they were to admit the problem to a former employee that was fired. So you won't really see that happen much. And if you do, it's probably an isolated circumstance, and it's just not something that's very common. It's not very common practice as to, what I see it as, and the people that I talk to, the people that have experience in this kind of issue, and really what I've seen in the last 5 years of coming back to the United States and working in the private sector. I see that now, and I see it's a very common thing, and unfortunately it happens, and it damages companies a lot, and it damages the whole culture of that workplace. It could start out as a really great cultural workplace and end up being a total toxic work environment. And it does have its ripple effects, and it does, come in waves. And it's really hard to clamp down on it afterwards, and to get a hold of it. And then there's a lot of animosity that's built up over a longer period of time, you know. So, what do you do about that? You know, I mean, it seems that it's very commonplace to have toxic leadership in, you know, in the work environment today. So really what that takes is for you to recognize it and really conceptualizing the PFPs, personal freedom, financial freedom, and professional freedom, being able to, put those into practice in your own life. That's very, very important. So really, guys, I just want to kind of brush up on that, and I see it being a big problem in our workplace today. And that would be a solution over a period of time to get yourself in a position where you have the freedom to say, no, I'm not going to participate in this kind of work environment, and just take the first job that comes at you. So I hope that serves you, and if it does serve you, I've got more coming down the pike. So I mean, just watch out for it. And yeah, I've got a lot more material coming out in the future, and you might want to stay tuned to that. Peace.